Hi, welcome to another show, another podcast with the Global Network Against Weapons and Nuclear Power in Space. The Global Network was created in 1992 to prevent the arms race from moving into space. You can support the show by clicking on the like button and subscribing to our YouTube channel. And also check out our website, www.spaceforpeace.org, spaceforpeace.org. We thank Global Network board member Will Griffin for doing the tech work to make this show happen. Our guest this time is a friend of mine from right around these parts where I live. His name is Lou Kimball from Harpswell, Maine, a retired architect. And he's a partner in our twice a week anti-war vigils here in the town of Brunswick. Welcome to the show, Lou.
Thank you, Bruce. I'm happy to be here.
Glad to have you. Would you take a moment and tell that very interesting story as a way to introduce yourself about how you got kicked out of college during the Vietnam War?
Sure. So I was raised in Lake Charles, Louisiana, born in 1950. So I was ready. I graduated high school, went to college in 68. But at that time, my parents had no money. So I was forced to go to the local college, McNeese State, because I had a scholarship that paid everything. So I did that. They had a 2-year pre-architecture program, so it qualified for the scholarship, and off I went. About 2 or 3 weeks into my term, I was expelled for long hair. And again, 1968. So after being expelled, I said, well, I need a 2S deferment. NOM was happening. I had a goal to become an architect, so I wanted to continue. So one of my advisors in the art department said, well, you should cut your hair into a peace symbol and go around campus. That would be a way to protest and you wouldn't be kicked out. And I thought, well, that's interesting, but it doesn't really solve the problem, which is that they're kicking people out of school for long hair. So instead, I decided to fight it. And the first thing they did was get me in front of a disciplinary committee hearing. And at that time, the rule on hair was off the collar, out of the eyes, and off the ears. So I thought, oh, okay, my hair is plenty long enough, shoulder length. I just put it in a top knot. And so it was off the ears, out of my eyes, and off the collar. So I went to the disciplinary board hearing with looking like this, and I said, well, I don't see a problem. I've complied, so I'd like to go back to class. And the first thing they did was say to the stenographer that was present, leave the room. And the second thing they did was curse me out and kick me out. So then I got an attorney from the Office of Economic Opportunity, young attorney, thought he'd make a name for himself. And we took it all the way through the state Supreme Court, losing at every turn. Now, at this point, it's in the spring, and I'm looking at going to NOM because I've lost my student deferment. So I go find another attorney because the previous attorney decided to leave town. What he thought would be great publicity turned out to be negative publicity to the point that he was literally railroaded out of town. So at this point, okay, got to do something. So I get this other lawyer and we're going along and he's trying to plan his defense and his appeal. And 2 weeks before the draft board hearing, the Chicago Sun-Times had an article. The very first federal hair case was a high school student in Chicago, and the feds ruled in favor of the student. He got his deferment back. So my attorney walks into the draft board hearing with literally a newspaper clipping that he got from the local library, put it on the desk and said, you're federal and you have to follow federal precedent. So there we go. Got back in school, of course, got out of Dodge and ended up at University of Houston for a while and then on to Oregon and so forth. So that was my introduction to deciding that in those days, what we called the man was not going to support me in anything that I was going to try to do. from then on, I've become a protester.
That's really a great story, Lou. And those of us that know you well know that you're a tough nut to crack. You're a fighter. Let's talk about our weekly vigils that we've been doing
Sure.
in Brunswick since February of 2022, every Thursday. We started out with a no war message, and then since last October, our message became stop the genocide, stop the arming genocide in Palestine. And so we've done this through all seasons and only missed a handful of times for the past 30 months.
Right.
So I wanted to ask you, why do you come to this protest?
That's an interesting question. So your choices to me are get out in the street and protest, or basically do nothing, because your individual vote, although it might be a feel-good moment for you to go vote, really means very, very little if you're trying to fight the military-industrial complex. Because in my mind, my opinion, both parties are bought by that complex, and money talks. So it doesn't matter if it's Republican or Democrat. We go to war. We go to war all the time. We go to war constantly. We have not yet, to my knowledge, not been at war, if you count all the covert wars that we are also promoting and providing advice to all over the world. So if you're going to do something, just go ahead and do it. And yes, I've gotten the feedback that, well, it doesn't make any difference either. Well, it makes a difference to me. And so I've met some wonderful people standing on picket lines, and, I've enjoyed myself, and I hopefully made some small difference. I know that Bruce and I at one point actually counted up what we called impressions there on Thursdays. We're there for an hour. So, we talk baseball, we talk a lot of things. But at one point we decided, well, let's just kind of get a rough count. And we did a count and did a multiplier. And Bruce, you're going to have to help me with numbers because my brain is foggy. But in just 6 months or so, it was well into 50,000 impressions. I mean, every car that passed by, even if you allow only one person per car, in an hour's time at a busy intersection, you're making a lot of impressions, for good or bad. I mean, we get, the finger, obviously, all the time. But we also get a lot of honks and waves and people that support what we're doing. And that's the encouraging part. That's where you think you might actually be making a difference.
Yeah, and then on Fridays, the local peace group called Peaceworks in Brunswick, we go to that vigil too, essentially carrying the same signs and banners, you and I and some of our other stalwarts that come to this Thursday vigil. Usually we have 4 or 5 people there. But on Friday, it's more like double that, or sometimes 3 times that many. But this vigil has been going on in Brunswick since 9/11, since 2001. Again, through all the seasons. It's a very hardy group of people that have kept that vigil going. So we're lucky in our community because we're raising these issues. And lately, on the genocide issue on our Thursday vigil, people have been stopping by and thanking us, and we don't often hear that. It's pretty good.
Right.
I wanted to ask you this. Would you share your thoughts on Israel's Zionist leader, Benjamin Netanyahu, coming to Washington this week? What do you think about that? And what do you think the response of the Congress is going to be to his speech?
Well, overall, of course, I've been extremely disappointed in our Congress, our government in total response to the genocide that's ongoing in Palestine. Even to the point of course, denying that it is genocide. in the face of all logic, and supplying all the weapons for this to be committed. So I don't expect a great deal, I guess, Bruce. I think that Netanyahu has become a convenient liberal democratic excuse for what's going on, because they can always point to this right-wing leader that's really the problem. And I don't buy that for 1 second. I mean, we are the problem. And it would be very easy, don't keep telling me about how, of course, Biden's not going to run, but he's still president. How Biden's trying to stop this. He's not trying to stop this. All he had to do was shut off the faucet and he would stop this. So Netanyahu, yes, he's not a great person. He's not a nice person. He has his own agenda. And when his agenda, which is complete annihilation of the Palestinian people, is solved, is accomplished, then he'll stop. And it won't matter what the U.S. does or doesn't do. The best we could do is get out. Just simply stop funding and giving weapons to Israel. I don't care who the leader is.
When you use the words, we are the problem, can you put some definition on that for us?
Sure. This will stop me if I start rambling, but I'm also a socialist. So I see this in terms of the savage capitalism that the United States has bred and maintained throughout the 250 years we've been around. We came here and destroyed an entire culture to take over their land. And we used slavery when it was, convenient to further the means of capitalism. And our I'm better than she is.
Hold on a minute. Your camera is moving around.
Well, I'm sorry.
You're kind of bouncing around.
There we go. Sorry.
All right.
The whole notion of let me back up. The lack of community that I sense, the lack of care for others, is a direct contributor in our thinking that somehow we should be telling everybody else in the world, and by we, I mean the United States of America, should be telling everybody else in the world what they do, what their government should look like, and how they should govern, all of which is based on simply the spread of empire. Because if you look at the root causes of every war, it'll be whatever our economic advantage dictates. That's what we do. That's what the United States does. The United States sees itself as still, to use Reagan's phrase, the shining city on the hill. And that's, to me, the problem, the root of the problem.
Do you think that Russia and China are truly the enemies of the United States?
Absolutely not. China in particular. Well, both. So it's funny, I had a bunch of liberal friends of mine who were having dinner the other night, and it came up, and like Netanyahu, Putin is the evil monster, Satan. And I simply asked a question around the table. I said, look, name one country that Putin has taken over, never mind the United States, because everybody jumps on Ukraine. I said, well, okay, let me give you Ukraine. Name another one. None. So, and then I always use the statement to say, look, when the Cuban Missile Crisis happened, what was the United States response? Well, let's go to war. Let's stop it, blah, blah, blah. Well, of course, Kennedy was, negotiating behind the scenes with Khrushchev, but there are no Russian military bases anywhere around our country. Yet we have 750 military bases all around the world. Again, we are the aggressor. Russia in Ukraine said quite plainly what the red line was, and then said before invasion in February, I think it was 22nd, said, look, this is all you have to do. We'll negotiate peace. We don't, no response from the United States because it does not fit in their worldview. They somehow think that, Russia is the enemy born out of, when we used to hide under our desk. Bruce remembers that. And China, China owns all our debt. We have put ourselves in a position economically with China that we're at a tremendous disadvantage. And you can see it in the increasing in tariffs because, well, gee, China can make a $10,000 electric vehicle, but we can't. So to hell with the environment, we're going to make sure you can't sell those vehicles, which is what, the working class would need in the United States. So, Taiwan, well, China has a legitimate claim to Taiwan, if you even want to put it that way. But once again, where are all their military bases? Where is the threat? I don't understand.
What is the U.S. NATO goal today? They appear willing to, in a way, I think World War III is already underway. In essence, as the U.S. is encircling both Russia and China.
Right.
And fighting Russia actively, U.S. NATO doing that through, using Ukraine as the proxy. But what is the U.S. and NATO goal overall? And are they willing to go to nuclear war? And if so, what does that tell us about the leadership of those,
exactly,
that collection of countries?
Exactly. It's a fascinating question, Bruce, because I don't see a logical answer to it. Because the goal is apparently to get to the edge of World War III, to stay on that edge constantly. So what does that mean? Does that mean, well, where's the advantage in that? I guess let's look at it that way. Well, the one advantage might be that we need a hyper military presence. Maybe we need things in space that could shoot lasers down and blow things up. I don't understand what that end game could be, because how much surrounding of those two countries do you need to do before they're no longer a threat? I mean, there's no answer to. There's no answer. Nobody's even asking the question. What is the end game? Bruce, I'm at a loss. I do not understand that part of what's happening. I mean, I understand, the basic economics of it, right? Our country is based on a wartime budget. We're a military country, and so that's our product. We export military equipment all over the world. We make sure there's some sort of, balance in nuclear weapons all over the world. Of course, we know there's not. But so given that, I mean, how much money do they need to make? I'd like to hear your opinion on that, Bruce. I can't figure it out. I don't know what the end game is.
Well, my feeling is that, first of all, U.S. and Europe, they've had more than 500 years of colonial occupation of the what we now call the global South, Middle East, Africa, Latin America, Asia, and that's fading. They're losing it. And I think out of desperation and out of this arrogance, they think that they can barnstorm their way around the world and threaten and bomb and, terrorize. I think the U.S. and NATO are the largest terrorists on the planet.
Yeah, agree.
You and I both did some things in support of Julian Assange when it looked like he might be sent back to this country. We did some public bannering and such together, but he found in his WikiLeaks cables that the U.S. created ISIS, which the American people and the people of Europe were told to be afraid of, and that we needed to go and fight them. But in fact, the U.S. and NATO created them and used them against enemies of the U.S., like Syria, for example. And now ISIS is actually some of the ISIS fighters are now inside of Ukraine,
right,
fighting against the Russians. So I think out of this desperation, they're freaking out, and they're willing to push it as far as they think they can go. And the question is, will they go nuclear when they see that they can't win? I think it's an open question, and I think it's time for everybody to get off their ass and to be out on the street, shutting down the weapons corporation places. We're having a protest here in our community this coming weekend, July 27th, at Bath Iron Works, where they build the destroyers that go to today help target Yemen, and have been blasting Yemen because they have the temerity to help defend the Palestinian people.
Right.
So let's go to the latest news here. Biden's announcement that he's not going to run again, but he's going to stay in office. I mean, obviously he can't run because he's got serious problems that they don't want to talk about. But he seems okay enough to stay in office for 6 more months. But he also declared his support for his Vice President Harris. Do you think that the liberal Democrats are going to be joyous in supporting Harris? Or you think at the convention in August, the Democrats are going to try to put somebody else in there? Because clearly Harris has shown that she's a neocon and someone that is controlled by the neocons inside the Democratic Party.
Right. If Harris does become the nominee, I expect no change in policy whatsoever from what Biden's been doing. They have an interesting problem with picking a vice presidential candidate if that's the way they decide to go. I personally think, depending on how Obama comes out, he's been very quiet just recently about Biden's endorsement of Harris. Unexpectedly to me, quiet about that, as if he has some other idea. Not sure what that idea would be. I think Harris, for the Democrats, not that I support her, but I think that it is their best choice. It's their best shot at beating Trump. I personally don't think anybody's going to beat Trump. But there you go. It matters so very little to me when I think of myself as a part of the peace community, because none of this is a big change at all. It's not what it's purported to be. When the blues are in, everything's great. When the reds are in, everything's bad. No, that's not true. People are living hand to mouth now with Biden in charge. The country's in shambles. We have no healthcare system, worst results of any healthcare since any advanced country in the world. On and on. Education's a shambles. But we'll continue to spend enormous amounts of money worldwide promoting warfare and regime change, other than our own, everywhere. If we see something we don't like, we're going to go in with the CIA and work to change it, just like they did in Donbass, just like they did in South America for all these decades. So I expect no change. I think that if anything, that idea that there will be no change politically means that you have to get out and make the change yourself in the street. You have to get out. You have to write those letters to the Congress people. You have to do everything you possibly can to bring attention to the problem, which is inherent in a broken system, which the corporations control. So, follow the money. My $20 or my $27 to Bernie back in the day was meaningless compared to what AIPAC spends on a single primary race.
Yeah.
Insane. The system's broken. We don't have a third-party system. 47% of Americans say they're independent, with 27% being Republican and 27% being Democrats. So you could truthfully say that we're run by the minority, regardless of which party's in.
Right.
And
Do you think the CIA runs the United States?
I think, it's an interesting question. Do I think they run the United States? I'm not sure they run the United States. I think they are a huge part in accomplishing the goals of the people that do run the United States, which to me are, the people with all the money to spend to have the influence necessary to buy the votes, and grease the wheels of the military-industrial complex. I think the CIA is a huge part of it in foreign affairs, but I'm not sure they run the country.
Okay. You want to ask me a question?
Sure. What are the Orioles going to do, Bruce? They're in first now, so.
I'm starting to get a little worried, actually.
Yeah.
I should tell the listeners that you and I are big baseball fans, and when we do these vigils every week, we spend some time, besides talking politics, we do talk about baseball. Yeah. And right now, my team's in first place. Your team is having a tough time.
Very tough time. We just lost another pitcher last night, and our second baseman to injuries.
That's the Atlanta Braves.
Yeah.
And but I'm getting worried that my team is going to take the easy way out and not really make a big move. I hope I'm wrong.
Well, I do have a more serious question for you. Talk for a moment about what's happening with the close Earth orbit satellites in space. How are they being utilized by the military-industrial complex to survey, spy on, accomplish the goals of that complex?
Well, that's a very good question. It's called Low Earth Orbit, LEO, and it's being loaded up with satellites, military satellites, and what they call dual-use satellites, meaning they can kind of shield it public relations program by saying, well, this is just a civilian satellite, but a dual-use satellite means that part of its role is military as well. And Elon Musk just got permission to launch 40,000 more satellites into lower Earth orbit. The goal of the U.S. is to fill up the declining parking spaces, because it's getting so crowded in lower Earth orbit, to fill them up before Russia and China can put significant numbers of satellites in space. Because, as you say, they use these satellites to see everything on the Earth, to hear everything on the Earth, and to target everything on the Earth. Elon Musk's Starlink satellite system, for example, was essentially turned over to Ukraine and provided them with the ability to begin to hit Russian targets inside of Russia's country. The recent bombing at the beach in Crimea, where they killed and wounded hundreds of people, civilians. The recent attack on the Russian early warning radar system inside of Russia that they used to see if the United States has launched a nuclear attack on them, and the Ukrainians hit it thanks to Elon Musk and the U.S. Space warfighting system. And now, because the lower Earth orbit is getting so crowded, the scientists are worried that there's going to be a cascading collision. And when that happens, the Earth goes dark, because virtually everything we do on the planet today, cell phones, GPS, internet banking, you name it, it's hooked up to satellites. And when they start crashing into each other, the Earth goes dark and we're in big trouble. And then we can't even get a rocket off the planet Earth anymore, because there's essentially a minefield of debris orbiting the planet. So let me stop, give you the last chance to make a closing comment, say something to the listeners, anything you want to say.
Thank you, Bruce. I would say again, let me emphasize that I don't care who you are or where you are. You can make a difference by getting into the street in making your voice heard. And I invite you to do so.
Thank you, Lou Kimball.
You're welcome.
Glad to have you on. Appreciate it very much. And thanks for watching another edition of Space Alert. Next month, we'll do another show with a leader from a different part of the movement around the world. Until then, good luck to you all, and please get organized.